Are you looking for the best 2024 NFL Best Ball weekly rankings and advice around? Then get ready for the Week 9 IDP Plus Best Ball podcast. Welcome into the Draft Lab. I'm Joel Worth, and this is the IDP Plus Best Ball podcast. It is Week 9. We're coming off a big slate. We had the 13-game slate on Week 8. National Tight Ends Day. Balled out. All the tight ends had monster days. Didn't work out too well for me, but I do want to talk about Week 8 a little bit. I know we're not supposed to do this. It's not good for the algorithm, not good for the SEO. But I want to review Week 8 because I think there are some lessons learned, and this is what this is all about, right? I mean, anybody can give you rankings. You can do your own rankings. We'll get to rankings. We'll get there. But I want to talk about how I think I went wrong on Week 8 and what I think I can take away from that, and maybe something you can take away from that as well. So I want to talk about Week 8 in the big picture. So I think it would be very easy to look at Week 8 and just say all the tight ends week went off, and I didn't have any of those tight ends, right? I didn't have Cade Otton. I didn't have a whole lot of Kyle Pitts. I drafted a lot of Brock Bowers. I drafted a lot of Trey McBride, and I was good with that, right? And they produced. They were good, but they just they didn't score touchdowns when literally everyone else in the world did. Like I said, Cade Otton had a huge day. Mike Gesicki even had a big day without a touchdown, but Kittle, on and on and on. All the tight ends had big days, right? Okay, so that burned me. So it would be very easy, like on a surface level, to say, okay, I didn't get the tight ends right. All the tight ends went off. That's why I lost last week. But I think it goes deeper than that. And I want to dig into why I'm, on the weeks I'm not doing well, why I'm not doing. This is my first year doing in-season best ball, right? So I'm learning as well, and I've been successful, right? I've had a few very big, very profitable weeks, and I'm very happy with where I'm at right now. But I want to get better. I want to get more consistent. I want to have more of those winning weeks, and so I want to self scout, right? NFL teams go on the bye, they kind of self scout and see what they're doing. Have their offensive coaches look at their defensive work and stuff like that. So that's what I want to do. I want to be like self scouting every week. I don't do well. Every week I do well. If I want to know why I'm doing well, I want to know why I'm not doing well. And I think there's a real clear signal on what happened in Week 8, other than the whole tight end thing. And that is, I think my teams are just way too kind of homogenous. And as much as I talk about getting, not being a slave to ADP and not being a slave to closing line value and stuff like that, I'm still really chasing that. And it's a very hard thing to kind of break yourself out of, to force yourself into drafting suboptimal lineups, even though, on an intellectual level, I know that, Chalk's not going to hit. Chalk has not been hitting. Chalk has not been hitting very much this year. Week 7, which is a week that I did very well on, Chalk hit. Chalk was all really good. Nobody had real monster weeks, but all the top, basically, 10 out of the top 12 guys, I think, had very, very solid weeks that week. And there was really no one outside of, say, the top 40 or so, any of those, low undrafted, low draft percentage guys that really broke out. So that was a Chalk week, and I did well. I was happy with that. But Week 8 obviously was not. Chalk did not hit last week. Saquon Barkley didn't have a good week. A.J. Brown didn't have a good week. Derrick Henry didn't have a good week. So on and on and on. Jamar Chase was good, not great. Didn't break out. He had a touchdown. Didn't have a huge day. So there was just a lot of, again, it was one of those weeks where the Chalk just didn't hit. And so when I'm going through these drafts and I'm thinking, and I think this is really important, is that, I see a player come to me and I think there's some real value there. I think, they're beyond their ADP. I want to take advantage of that. And there's also that part of me in the back of my mind that says, I don't want to give, the drafter next to me even better value if I don't take that player. But again, that's where we have to reinforce ourselves and say, okay, none of these players are perfect. None of them are impervious to having a bad week. They can all not go off. So we need to have, we need not be so super homogenous in our lineups. And there's only, if you're talking, main battle royales, there's only 6 spots. So there's only 6 draft positions. You can't get super different because there's going to be some overlap in those draft positions. So it's really hard to kind of you need to force yourself to differentiate to get there. So that's something I really want to do. And I remember very specifically going into the weekend, there were 2 players in specific that I wanted to get more exposure to that I didn't think I had enough exposure to. J.K. Dobbins, Javonte Williams. Now, neither one of them got there. That's not the point of this. So the point was I spent kind of the back end of the week, Friday, Saturday, kind of forcing those guys into my lineups. And then I got to Sunday and I looked at my exposures and I'm like, okay, I don't have enough Devon Achane. I don't have enough. I don't have any Josh Jacobs, to be honest. I mean, if I can go back to you look at the tape. I said on the live DFS show with my buddy Jameson Hutchinson that, if there was one player that was going to burn me last week, it was Josh Jacobs because I just didn't have him anywhere, DFS or best ball. So that was a big problem. And then the other guy was Lad McConkey. I know this is going to sound like, oh, you're just picking off guys and that did well. I wish I was wrong. I wish I would have had those guys, but those 3 specifically, and this is kind of where this is coming from, is I went into Sunday thinking I need to get more of these guys, and McConkey, there was reasons to fade him, right? He had the hip injury. It was a tough spot for the Chargers coming off the Monday night game, so there was reasons to fade him. But I wanted some exposure because it was a good matchup, assuming he did play. So, the Saints are typically bad against slot receivers. They've lost Paulson to Debo the week before. There was going to be some, turnover there. So there was reasons to want him. And when I was drafting on Sunday, there just wasn't enough opportunity because I was still trying to get, the Javonte Williams, trying to get my J.K. Dobbins stocks up. And I didn't get to those 3 at all. I had some HN, obviously. He was getting drafted in almost every draft. But 0 Josh Jacobs, 0 Lad McConkey, and those guys were the ones who went off, and those guys were the ones who killed me. So, I need to make a bigger point of early in the week, not being a slave to the ADP, because I've been going into these drafts early in the week, thinking, okay, I'm doing this because I can get really good kind of closing line value because the ADP shifts so much, the projections shift so much. When you're drafting early in the week, you're basically drafting without projections. So it's basically your rankings against everybody else's. And that is a good way to get some closing line value, but I'm not, I'm drafting too many of the same teams. Not exactly. I'm not duplicating myself, obviously, but I'm drafting too many similar teams that if those teams don't get there, I'm just a whole block of those teams just aren't winning if one guy just doesn't get there. So I want to be more conscious of early in the week getting more variance, a wider spread of players into my lineup early in the week, so I don't have to force them into my lineup late in the week, where I can just be that's when I can take the values from the other players that maybe having to do the same thing that I was doing last week, and that's trying to force players into my lineup. So I know that's kind of it sounds really intuitive and it's something we should be doing, but when you get into these drafts and you see a Derrick Henry slide into the second round and think, I just can't give up that value. He's going 1 overall, he's going 2 overall, and now he's down to 6, 7. I can't give up that value. It's like sometimes you have to give up that value to get your portfolio into a place where you're getting enough variance, where you're getting enough exposure to different players, where you're getting enough, where you're mixing up your teams enough so that you're getting exposure to some players here and some players here and some players here, but they're not. I'm getting exposure to this group and this group at the same time, but never with this third group. So it's important to kind of mix those all together, get some differentiation in your teams. So that's something I've been working on this week. Haven't had a lot of time this week. Haven't done as many drafts as I would like, but it's something I'm trying to keep in mind for week number 9. Speaking of which, let's get to it. We've got a 12-game slate this week. Obviously, 13 games last week. We do have 2 teams on bye and 2 fairly important ones. The Steelers and the 49ers. Obviously, the 49ers more important than the Steelers, losing Jordan Mason, still don't have Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brock Purdy off the quarterback list. So pretty big buys that are important. The games that I'm targeting, there are 4 games this week that have totals of over 48 points. And those are the games that I want to hit heavily. That's Atlanta, Dallas, and we'll talk about that in a minute. My 2 top players this week are going to come from that game, and we'll talk about that and why. Also, Miami, Buffalo, Green Bay, Detroit, and the Rams and Seattle. Now, I'm recording this on Thursday night. We did get news that Puka Nacua did re-injure his knee today. Initial words are it's not super serious, but that is going to throw a huge wrench in everything. We'll talk about that when we get to the rankings. He's been going ahead of Cooper Kupp. If this is something that causes him to miss the game, now Kupp should be getting pushed way up. So that's something I'm going to take advantage of tonight, drafting during the game while the game's going on. Just forcing Cooper Kupp, just because I do have a decent amount of him already, but just kind of forcing him early. We'll see how this shakes out. We don't know. But I think Cooper Kupp is someone whose ADP is going to take a massive rise here in the next day or two. Big picture, again, same as last week. There's just the running backs are so much deeper than the wide receivers, and it's so easy, especially at the top of the draft, it's so easy to go running back early and then box yourself out of those late round running backs, like we talked about like last week with Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, guys I wanted exposure to, Josh Jacobs, Devon Achane. Sometimes you just box yourself out because you can only take 2 running backs, obviously, at the most. So, yeah, again, you're kind of playing the game where you kind of have to push up those early round receivers, maybe to a place you're not comfortable with, just to kind of get your rosters in roster builds in a place that you're comfortable with, because otherwise you're just never going to get to those back end running backs, and that's obviously a problem that we want to address. So I think players, the wide receivers that we're going to talk about early on receivers, CeeDee Lamb, again, Cooper Kupp, who I think is going to push into the first round with the news of the Nacua injury, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown. I think those have to get pushed up in your rankings just so you can so you're not forcing yourself into double running back starts. And again, it's similar to last week. There's no quarterbacks going early, like super early within the first 2 rounds. Most of the quarterbacks aren't going until kind of late in the third. Honestly, quarterbacks are going late this week. Really, no tight ends going super early again. Last week it was kind of Brock Bowers at the top of the second, that 2-3 turn. He's been pushed down. I think that's a mistake. I think he should be going there again. Really good matchup. We'll talk about that when we get to the rankings. But he's not going. There's no tight end going in that early in those first 2 rounds. So again, you're setting yourself up for a situation where it's very easy to go running back, wide receiver, and then you're stuck in the back end, the back 2 rounds, when you want to kind of be diversifying your roster. It's like, okay, again, I need quarterback, tight end. I need quarterback, tight end. So it's going to be important to kind of force some of those elite quarterbacks in the middle rounds so that you leave roster spots open in the back end. So with that said, let's get into the rankings, and let's talk about some of the players that I like above ADP, because there are several, and it's been very interesting early in the week seeing how things are being drafted and how my rankings are so much different than kind of consensus. So I've started out with CeeDee Lamb as number 1 with a bullet. He was my obvious number 1 this week, and I'll talk about why in a second. The market, like the rest of the draft, started out very heavy Alvin Kamara, and I get that, right? I get Kamara. They play the Carolina Panthers, probably the worst defense in the league, very bad run defense, very good spot for him. But I like CeeDee Lamb, and I love the Bijan Robinson bring back. So Atlanta's defense does not put pressure on the quarterback, so that's an excellent situation for Dak Prescott. Dallas cannot run the ball. They brought a Dalvin Cook last week. That was an embarrassment with the Rico Dowdle illness. They can't run, so they have to throw, and they cannot. Atlanta can't pressure the quarterback, so that is an excellent situation for Dak Prescott to have time to look for CeeDee Lamb and kind of just let him come open. So CeeDee Lamb is my number one, and honestly, it's not close. I have Bijan Robinson ranked number two. Dallas is very much a run funnel defense, so I think that's an excellent matchup, and I love that bring back. You don't have to draft Bijan Robinson number two. His ADP started like 9.5, 10, something like that. So he wasn't being drafted until the back end of the second round. He's now going. He's moving up. He's somewhat usually going in the early second, kind of right after the turn. So it's not early in the week. You could get that. You could get the CeeDee Lamb Bijan Robinson double. In that, usually Kamara was going first, and then sometimes you get Lamb at 2, you get him at 3, sometimes you get him at 4, and then it was really easy to get Bijan Robinson to kind of swing around the back end and do the double. So I started out the week getting a lot of that combination, and I do like that. We'll see how it plays out, but I like how that worked. How that worked out early, we'll see. That game may bust, and then that looks stupid, and then I lost a bunch of drafts, but. That's the advantage to drafting early, and that you can kind of force these combos that may not be available later in the week. Like right now, CeeDee Lamb he's gone first overall in the last pretty much every draft I've done in the last couple days. So he's the number one with a bullet. So it's really now, and Robinson's not falling back to 12. So now it's really tough to do that double. So that's something you can do by getting it early. Talked about Cooper Kupp with the Puka Nacua injury. I think he's going to move up into the first round, but we will see how that plays out. Other players I have ranked higher than consensus. I had to drop Puka Nacua down. He was going in that kind of 8, 9, 10 range as well, kind of right by Bijan Robinson. He's getting pushed out in a couple drafts early tonight where he didn't get drafted at all after the news of the injury. Now he's kind of getting pushed down to like the third, fourth round. Now we got late word that the injury isn't serious, so we'll see if he kind of bounces back up. That's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Again, Bowers, his ADP is 19, so that puts him basically at the 3-4 turn, basically a full round later than he was going last week. That's a great matchup with Cincinnati. Cincinnati's defense is terrible. So I think he's being kind of artificially penalized for not going off on national tight ends. They like literally every other tight end did. When he got a ton of targets. He was productive, just in a general sense, just didn't score a touchdown. So, and that's a great matchup. So yeah, I want to get more exposure to him. Evan Ingram. If you're not getting Brock Bowers, Evan Ingram's a great choice at tight end this week. His ADP is 32.4. He is so much better. He's so much more productive with Christian Kirk out of the lineup. Christian Kirk obviously broke his collarbone, is going to be out for the year. So that's a really good spot. And we don't know about Brian Thomas Jr. yet. Initial word was he was going to miss a couple weeks. He's practicing on a limited basis already, so there's a chance he plays this week. But if he's unable to play, then Evan Ingram becomes the Jacksonville entire passing offense. I would rather have Brian Thomas Jr. in there to kind of take some pressure off. I don't want Evan Ingram having to carry that entire load by himself. But either way, just should be double-digit targets falling out of bed for Evan Ingram in the offense right now. So I do like him quite a bit. So let's talk about round one and where things are seated right now. As we said, CeeDee Lamb, the ADP is pushing up. It's still lower than Alvin Kamara's. But like I said, CeeDee Lamb is going number one in every draft I've done pretty much the last 2 days. So if you do a draft, expect CeeDee Lamb to go first overall. Kamara's usually 2 or 3. He usually doesn't slip past 3. Again, you've got Chase moving up. I think it's a reaction to how many running backs there are early and how many running backs there are overall, and that's why Chase is getting pushed up. Obviously, a very good matchup with the Raiders. Don't expect T. Higgins to play again this week. Sounds like he's not practicing, not expected to play again. So another excellent setup for Jamar Chase. Saquon Barkley, again, coming off a couple weeks where 2 weeks ago he was good, not great. 170 yards rushing and a touchdown. Last week just didn't get there. Kind of all Jalen Hurts again. So, but excellent matchup with Jacksonville. Very bad defense. So another good matchup for him. Derrick Henry, interesting this week. I think we need to throw out that entire last week for Baltimore. Again, I think we mentioned that was really a trap spot for them. Coming off the Monday night game, back-to-back road games, so short week, and then that Monday night game was a track meet. So you had to expect them to be really tired. So it was not a surprise to me that that game was competitive or that Cleveland won, to be honest. So I think this is a much better spot for him. They go back home. They get the full week to rest. So, yeah, I do definitely want some Derrick Henry exposure because I think they're going to want to settle things down on offense and give him the ball. And then Kyren Williams wraps up round 1. We'll see if he pushes up with the Puka Nacua news or if I don't know that he's going to move that much. If Cooper Kupp moves up into the first round, then that may push him down a little bit. But either way, great spot for him. Seattle's run defense is not good. Got burned by James Cook last week. So another great spot for all the guy does is score touchdowns. So basically a guaranteed touchdown at this point. So I like Kyren Williams quite a bit. So that kind of rounds out the top 6. That's where you're going in round 1. Round 2. This is your 7 through 9 or 7 through 12 players. Now you're talking AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, Bijan, who we mentioned. Puka Nacua his ADP is still at 10.6. That's going to fall. There's no question. That's going to come way down. He's not going to hang in this group very long. There you see Josh Allen. He's technically in that group. I just don't see him getting drafted there that often. So I think he's someone who's falling as we get further in the week. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown with the excellent matchup. I don't know if it's an excellent matchup, but it's an excellent game script against Green Bay. That should be a high-scoring game environment. So like him quite a bit. And again, he's a receiver, so that if you take a Kamara early, you want to get another receiver instead of going running back. Kind of gives you a little bit of roster flexibility. Lamar Jackson starts off round 3, ADP of 14.6. That's pick 13. So you're starting to see a little bit of variance there. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, again, excellent matchup with Green Bay. Their run defense just still not great. Malik Nabers is interesting. Had a really good game the first time they met up with Washington. But we've seen some news in the on the wires that he's getting doubled more frequently. There's there's no threat opposite him, especially with Tyrone Tracy's going to be out. That's a concern of the concussion. So I'm a little bit lower on Nabers, but definitely don't want to full fade him. But yeah, it's just that offense just isn't working with Daniel Jones. The offensive line is collapsing, so he just doesn't have time after the injury to Andrew Thomas. It's just a bad situation in New York, so I'm a little bit concerned about Nabers going forward. We will see. Jalen Hurts just getting all those push touchdowns. Just doesn't matter that if he throws 1 or if he throws 3, he's getting a couple touchdowns on the ground. So an excellent option, and one you can play unstacked. You don't necessarily have to force an AJ Brown or a Devonta Smith. He's just getting so many rushing touchdowns that it's okay to play him by himself. And then Kenneth Walker. It looks like a bad spot, but the Rams defense is not great. They did a nice job against the Vikings last week. Now they got to go on the road. We'll see doesn't look good for DK Metcalf again. So I think Walker's going to be the focal point of the offense. Lockett and JSN just got nothing done. So I like him as well. And then Cooper Kupp rounds out the end of round 3. That is, like I said, he is going to move up. He's going. I fully believe that by the time we get to Sunday, his ADP will be around. It's probably going to drop about 10 spots. It's probably going to go from like 18 to 8 now. That's where he will be drafted. It's just mathematically, it's hard to get the ADP down any higher, lower than that. But I think he's someone who's going to be going by the time we get to Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, he's going to be going around that 6-7 turn. I think he's going to be a fringe first round player. So that takes us, that's the first half of the draft. Again, you can see there's just not a lot of quarterbacks, not a lot of tight ends. We haven't hit a tight end yet. So it's unless if you're someone who wants to take quarterback late, you're kind of forcing yourself into receiver to filling up your receiver running back flex spots early. And then again, we talked about how hard it is to get to those players at the back end that you want to. So you almost need to force a quarterback early this week. So I'm going to be interested to see how those ADPs shake out at the end of the week and what the ownership percentages are. Now we're talking round 4. So this is where Bowers comes in. HN, like him quite a bit. I mean, he's so much better. Obviously, he's better with Tua, but he is like a league-winning level player with Tua involved back in the lineup. So I had a monster game last week, obviously to my chagrin. Don't expect anything less this week. Big matchup, division matchup with the Bills. Again, it's one of our games to target, over 48-point target or over 48-point totals. So like him quite a bit. Jaden Daniels against New York didn't have a great game week 1 or the first time they met up. I think that was week 2, something like that, week 2 or 3. So didn't have a great game last week either with the rib injury. Other than that Hail Mary did a lot of work for his stat line, and he was someone who's. Remember, his draft position last week really fluctuated. Wasn't he drafted at all early when we thought he was going to be concussed, and then people kind of forcing, or with the rib injury, thought he wasn't going to play, and people kind of forced him into their lineup at the end of the week. And just didn't have a great game. Drake London, fading him this week just because I think it's a bad matchup. Like I said, Dallas is very much a run funnel defense. They're good in pass coverage, very bad in run defense. So I think that's a game where Atlanta is just going to try and run the ball quite a bit and just keep the ball away from Dak and CeeDee Lamb. They're going to try. So I don't like that matchup for Drake London very much. And Terry McLaurin, if you want to do the McLaurin-Daniels stack, they're right next to each other. You kind of need to force it a little bit. It's tough to do at the back end of this. This is round 4. So you're coming down to the 6th pick. It's kind of tough to get around because they're both going around here. So you kind of need to force that a little bit. If you're if they fall to that turn pick, you kind of need to force it there. It's tough to get them around the corner because the wide receivers really drop off after that. I do like Olave, but you can see basically a 5-spot difference in ADP. So he's kind of the last of the tier in the receiver group. And then James Cook, great week last week, had a great week against Miami the last time they played. So he's very good expectation for him to have a good week this week as well. So he's someone I'm, if I don't go running back, he's someone I definitely want to get some exposure to. So that takes us to the end of round 4. Now we're into the turn. Trey McBride. Man, if that guy just scored some touchdowns, he would be an absolute stud. But double-digit targets last week, very productive against Miami. So, yeah, just get yourself in the end zone, my man. Help us out. And Njoku's dealing with a little bit of an injury, and not a great matchup with the Chargers. So I definitely like Bowers and McBride ahead of Njoku, but again, want to have some exposure because Jameis Winston has completely unlocked Njoku. Then it's Olave Pitts coming off the monster game. and DeAndre Swift. They get the Arizona Cardinals. We probably need to talk about the Bears. I was very high on Caleb Williams last week. He just destroyed me in DFS. Destroyed me. He didn't destroy me because I was a little more varied in my quarterback picks in best ball, but I did have quite a bit of exposure to Caleb Williams. He had a terrible game last week coming off the bye. Very disappointed. Now he gets Arizona, a little bit tougher, or excuse me, better defense to throw against than the tougher Miami defense. But again, it's back-to-back road games. You went to Washington, now you go back to Chicago, then you got to go to Arizona. So it's a tough spot. I don't think I'm going to be as aggressive drafting the Bears this week as I was last week. And then Devonta Smith, again, playing Jacksonville. Jacksonville does play a lot of man defense. So that should consolidate the targets to Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. So I do want to have definitely some exposure to both of them. That's starting us off around. This is like around the 5 turn. Evan Ingram, we talked about. Love him this week. Joe Burrow, you want to get the stack with Jamar Chase. DK Metcalf, I'm not drafting. Just doesn't sound like he hasn't practiced yet. Doesn't sound like he's going to be available for the game this week, so I'm just not drafting him. I did early in the week when we didn't know, so I've got enough shares if he does play. Again, if he does, even if he comes back and plays, if he's not limited, if he's not 100%, what's the likelihood that he really goes off? So yeah, I'm kind of probably going to take him out of my rankings for the rest of the week. Zay Flowers, speaking of that, is someone I took out of my rankings. Kind of shows you the danger of this. I took out of my rankings when he didn't look like he was going to play. Then all of a sudden he shows up at practice on Friday, all good, dancing around, everything's great, and then he goes off against Cleveland. Also a good sign for Lad McConkey because he gets that matchup. He gets the Cleveland slot matchup this week. So I do like McConkey some. Definitely want to get some exposure to him after his monster game last week. And then David Montgomery, great spot against the Packers. Again, their run defense is not very good. Should be a very high-scoring environment. Definitely they're going to want to keep the ball out of Jordan Love's hands if he's playing, or Malik Willis. I think so. I think this is a good script for Montgomery, just because it's an offense that they're not going to want to let take its time, have the ball too much. So I do think they're going to try and run the ball on the Packers. And you can. Their run defense is not great. So good spot for Montgomery this week. I think he's someone, again, this is the spots where these are the guys I really want to get some exposure to. Then, that it's hard to get to because you just don't have enough spots. Josh Jacobs, same situation. Whether or not Jordan Love plays, if it's Malik Willis, we've seen huge workloads for Jacobs. If it is Jordan Love playing, if he's able to come back from the groin injury, then they're not going to want to make him have to throw too many times. They're going to want to put him in danger. So I think this is going to be a big Josh Jacobs week, and I definitely want to have volume-wise. Detroit's very tough defense to run against, but I think he's going to have a lot of volume. And that's what we're chasing, right? We're chasing volume. Because that's the path to fantasy points. So definitely want to get some Jacobs. Kirk Cousins, again, I don't like the passing game matchup this week, so I'm not going to have a ton of Kirk Cousins. Amari Cooper, you only talk about a guy who let me down last week. Wow, I just had a ton of exposure to Cooper. Thought with the full week of practice things would be honky dory with him and Josh Allen. Just didn't happen. I think he only had one catch. So that's a psychological barrier that I'm going to have to get over because I'm going to want some exposure this week, because there's the possibility he goes off and has a game similar to the first game he had in Buffalo, only with more snaps and the greater point value that comes with that. Do like Mark Andrews some. If you get a Lamar Jackson, don't get Zay Flowers. And it's not a great matchup for Flowers. It's not a great matchup for the Baltimore receivers because Denver's secondary is terrific. So if you want to stack partner with Lamar Jackson, I do like Andrews some. He's getting 4 or 5 targets every week. He's implemented back into the offense. And then Marvin Harrison, I think it's going to come, right? At some point, he had a much better game last week against Miami, a big part of the Arizona win. So, again, tough matchup for Chicago, having to do all that traveling. You got to feel like they're going to be kind of, how ready are they going to be to play after giving up that Hail Mary? They may be super motivated. They may be, maybe down in the dumps a little bit. So Harrison's someone I definitely want to have a good deal of exposure to because he's showing that when Kyler Murray gets him the ball, he can be a very explosive player and a very productive fantasy player. So that is it for that. Takes us basically to the players that are getting drafted regularly within your drafts. So let's talk about some of the players, the scroll down options, the differentiators that you're going to need to get yourself some money, because that's what this is all about, right? You want to make some money. Um, DJ Moore, again, I'm not super high in the Chicago passing game, but I want to have some exposure as well there. Tony Pollard, a little bit dinged up, but a good matchup against New England, especially with DeAndre Hopkins gone. I don't think they can sustain Calvin Ridley getting 15 targets or whatever he got. So a good matchup for Pollard. Hopefully he's healthy, assuming he is. That's a good spot. Definitely want to get some exposure there. Jaden Reed, excellent matchup for him. Much better matchup for against Detroit than it was against Jacksonville. So just a more zone heavy team. So I like Jaden Reed some. Obviously better if Jordan Love's going to play, but he's really the only one. If it is Malik Willis again, he's really the only receiver that they've integrated into the offense when Malik Willis is playing quarterback. If you go back to look at the Indianapolis game, the Tennessee game last week against Jacksonville, he's the number one read when Willis is in the game. You cannot roster Malik Willis in best ball, unless you know for certain that he's going to be the starter, because he's going to be active, right? So you're the only way you get a sub is if your player is inactive. So he's going to be active. So unless you are very certain that, and this is probably going to be a game time decision, we're probably not going to know until Sunday. So he's really someone. It's again, you can't start him in this format unless draft him, start him, unless you know for sure that he is going to be playing. But do you want to have some Jordan Love exposure in case he gets activated, if he's able to get over the groin strain. Cedric Tillman obviously came up with a big game last week. He's their number one receiver target. And look at their receiver target. They're getting a ton. They're throwing a lot. Elijah Moore got a bunch of targets. Cedric Tillman got a bunch of targets. And Njoku got a bunch of targets. Jerry Jeudy's the odd man out there. So Cedric Tillman is the wide receiver one in Cleveland until further notice. So, you definitely need to keep some exposure there. I do like Tua quite a bit this week. I think he's going to play better than he did. Obviously, he can't play worse than he did week 2 against Buffalo. But I do want to have, if you're taking Tyreek, round 1, early round 2, then you're definitely going to want to have some Tua stacks there. I like him with Achane as well. I caught a touchdown pass last week too. So like that. J.K. Dobbins disappointed last week, but I still want to have some exposure. What else is there? Keon Coleman had a great week last week at the expense of Amari Cooper. He's getting more and more involved. Josh Allen is getting him more and more involved. So I like him as part of Josh Allen's stacks. Lad McConkey, we talked about, had a great week last week. Hopefully he's more healthy with the hip and a good matchup. We just saw Zay Flowers kind of in the same role go off against Cleveland last week. So McConkey's definitely someone I'm definitely want to be following up on that week, on that breakout last week. Jameis Winston, I had no exposure to last week. Just put my head in the sand on that one. He did throw some, and honestly, if you think about it, I mean, he was one interception right into Kyle Hamilton's breadbasket away from having 10 fewer fantasy points, but that's the game we play, and he ended up with close to 30. So that was a problem for me as well. Not as good a matchup this week. Baltimore pass defense is really bad, and again, the game script that they had coming off that track meet on Monday night. So this is not nearly as good a matchup as it was last week. So little hesitant to go full into the Jameis experience. Then Jordan Love, talked about that. I want to have some exposure in case he gets in there. And if he doesn't play, then you'll get the sub, and quarterback 7 is probably something like Tua like that, or Tua Tagovailoa if you get him in your rankings. So I wouldn't hate the sub there. So definitely want to get some Love exposure. And then Chase Brown, again, good matchup with Vegas, like him. So he's someone who's not going to get drafted very much. Definitely could see a spot where he gets a couple touchdowns. So that's kind of a back end guy I want some exposure to. And then Brian Thomas, again, if it weren't for the injury, he'd be going much higher than this. So just in case he plays, I want to have some lineups with him in it. So that takes us to the end of week 9. Hope we're learning from our mistakes, right? This is a tough game, right? This is really tough. I don't want to say it's a lottery ticket game, but it's really tough. You got to throw a lot of needles to put a winning battle royale lineup together. So hopefully we're going to learn from our mistakes. We're going to get better. We're going to have a much better week 9. Got a lot of games. Again, it's a 12 game slate. It's not like one of those 10 game slates when we have the London games and the double Monday night games and all that nonsense. Pretty close to a full schedule. So looking forward to it. You can find myself on Sunday morning. I mentioned the live DFS show with Jameson Hutchinson, 10 o'clock Eastern. We'll be hitting all these games and talking about all the DFS implications. You can find my best bets or DFS top plays article on the IDP Plus website later this week, and you can get 20% off any subscription to the site with the promo code PROPS. So just go to idpplus.com/memberships and enter promo code PROPS. Get access to all our tools, all our data, all the awesome IDP articles from all the awesome IDP experts. Those guys are much smarter about IDP than I am. And don't miss out on the subscriber Discord. A lot of good chatter in there. And if you've ever got start sit questions, IDP questions, great place to get them answered from some really, really smart people. So check us out on the channel. Again, there's so much going on here on the IDP Plus, IDP Bet side. So much cool stuff going on. Live podcasts, awesome stuff. Dynasty, IDP, start sits, everything you could ever want is all here on the IDP Plus and IDP Plus Bets YouTube network. So give us a thumbs up. Give us a subscription. If you got any questions, if you like the format, if you want to talk about, do you like, talking about last week, lessons learned from the week before? Do you like that? Or you just want to jam into the rankings? Give me some feedback. Let me know. Always appreciate that. You can find me on Twitter at @TheJoelWorth. DMs are always open. Always happy to talk there. So drop some feedback, drop some comments. Let us know how you like the show and what you want to see out of it. Appreciate you checking in, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.